Science, by definition, is based on skepticism and doubt. Nothing is ever 100% certain in science, and it should always be questioned. That is the very nature of science. But now, more than ever, you cannot trust science. You cannot trust experts. Science has been politicized, it has been weaponized, and it cannot be trusted. What's up, Piper friends? Welcome to Tim's School of Pipes, and class is in session. What do you think when something is presented as science? What do you think when the experts say? I used to believe in science. I used to believe in what the experts say. I come from a science background. My degree is in molecular biology. I worked in bioterrorism research for a long time. Then I was a science teacher for 2 decades. And I used to believe in the process of science. I used to believe in science as a form of skepticism. I used to believe that scientists agree that nothing is ever settled. Nothing is ever proven. Think about this. If we just accepted what scientists said as fact, we would still believe that the atom is still a solid sphere, right? A scientist came up with that and told us that atoms are solid, but we know that they're not. Atoms are mostly empty space. They have a nucleus made of protons and neutrons. Then there's a whole bunch of empty space with some electrons flying around out there. So if we just accepted everything an expert said and did not continue to question it, we would still believe that atoms are solid. We would still believe that there's only 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. If nobody ever questioned that, we wouldn't have the 118 elements that we know of on the periodic table right now. We would just have 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Because an expert said it. If we never questioned scientists and experts, we would still believe that the sun went around the earth. But we know better than that now. Why? Because Copernicus and others questioned that. And then we found out that the earth and the other planets in our solar system revolve around the sun, just like they do in all other solar systems. So if we just accepted everything that scientists said as being proven, as being fact, we would not have nearly as much knowledge as we have now. But we live in a current environment that is so polarized and so politicized that the news media wants to tell you that, well, science says so, so you should just trust the science. Well, I tell you what I think every time I hear experts say, especially now. I always questioned it because I have a science background and I understand the skeptical nature of science. But now more than ever, I question it. So when the government comes out and says, whoa, the experts say, oh, the scientists say, and then if you question it, the first thing they do is label you a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. Or they just label you as a lunatic or a science denier. By nature, by its very nature, science should be denied. It should be questioned. It should be looked upon with skepticism. But now, science has been weaponized. And we saw this in 2020, and shortly thereafter, we're just supposed to accept it. And we know now that it was a bunch of BS. So I want to read to you a few quotes from Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman is a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, a genius of a man. He is a giant among scientists. Here's just a few of things he has to say about science. Science is a culture of doubt. I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. Now, one more time. I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. So let me ask you, do we live in a time where experts and scientists and the government and the news media and all the PhD ivory tower professors trot out their answers and you're not supposed to question them? This is from the Nobel Prize winning physicist himself. I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. Here's another quote. Scientific knowledge is a body of statements of varying degrees of certainty. Some, most unsure. Some, nearly sure. None are absolutely certain. None are absolutely certain. Here's another quote. Science is a belief in the ignorance of experts. So the news media and the government keeps pounding this idea of you having to trust the science. So first of all, science by definition is skepticism. So there's that. But here's the other reason why I really don't trust science anymore. The peer review process and the researchers themselves. So let me explain. A scientist who is a professor at a university proposes a grant for something that he wants to study. Now, these grants, the money to fund this research comes from the government or special interest groups or corporations. Now, it's a twofold problem. First of all, the first problem is that between 70 and 90% of all university faculty now are left-leaning or very left-leaning. In other words, they're all progressives. All of them are part of the loony liberal left. And I'm a scientist, and I propose a grant, and if it does get approved and I get the money to do my research, then it has to go through the peer review process. So if I'm a university professor and I'm a researcher, who are my peers that are going to review my work and decide if it's worthy to be published and then disseminated to the public or not? Well, it's going to be other scientists at universities. But the problem is, they're all freaking loony leftists now. And so if my research doesn't toe the party line, if it doesn't fall in line with the current culture's worldview, then it's never going to make it to the public. It's never going to get researched. It's never going to get a grant funding. It's never going to happen. The other problem is that the government and corporations and special interest groups are all far left now too because of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have an entire government, we have an entire university system, and we have an entire cadre of these corporations and special interest groups that are funding the research, and they're all left-leaning. So I'm a little bit conservative. I'm a skeptical scientist. I say, hold on a minute. I'm not so sure about this gender-affirming care. I'm not so sure about giving hormones to a 9-year-old kid to change their gender or sex or whatever they're calling it today. First of all, I'm going to be ostracized, I'm going to be fired, and I'm never going to get that research off the ground. So science itself has created this big, giant echo chamber where the only science that is researched, the only studies that are done are those that go along with the current cultural worldview of the day, which right now is loony liberal left. So do you see the problem here? We've got an army of scientists that are all progressive. We've got an army of people that are funding those scientists that are all progressive, and the peer reviewers that review the science to deem it worthy of being published and disseminated are all loony leftists. So how then can you trust any science? You can't. You can't, because science itself is filtered through that current worldview of critical theory. All of it. All of it. If you did not learn in 2020 and what we have learned since then, that you cannot trust anything that the government tells you, corporations tell you, or scientists tell you, then you are suffering from cognitive dissonance, my friend. You have your head in the sand. You have ostrich syndrome. You are just denying the truth. Because the fact of the matter is, none of them can be trusted. So I ask you, when the next event occurs, and I have a gut feeling, just like when it happened in the last election cycle, that something's going to happen soon. They can call it disease. We don't want to get censored by the YouTube, so that's a letter. Disease is what they're calling it. Something's going to happen. And when Fauci and all the bureaucrats and all the ivory tower scientists and all the government officials and all the experts and all the corporations and all the loony left liberal news media comes out and calls you a conspiracy theorist, a science denier, a freaking lunatic, alt-right fringe, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You going to trust the science? I know I'm sure as crap not going to trust it, because I don't trust a damn thing that they say anymore, because every bit of it is filtered through the critical theory worldview first and foremost. And before some loony leftist come at me and say, prove it, I'm going to take a page out of the Me Too movement. Don't tell me to prove it. You prove that I'm wrong. You prove to me that the university system is not dominated by progressive liberals. You prove to me that the government is not. You prove to me that the crony corporate structure is not. You prove to me that the mainstream media is not. You prove that I'm wrong. I don't have to prove that I'm right, because I know that I'm right. No, I don't need to prove anything. You prove that I'm wrong. You prove I'm wrong. Okay? Ball's back in your court. We're going to play your stupid lefty game. You prove it. My question to you people is, where are you going to be when they tell you to mask up? Where are you going to be when they tell you to take the jab? Where are you going to be when they tell you to stay home? When they shut down your business? When they tell you to trust the science? I know exactly what camp I'm in. So that's all I got for you today. Just a question to think about. Do you trust anything from any of them anymore? I know I don't. As always, I appreciate you for watching. Give me a thumbs up. Drop me a comment down in the comment section. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. Just click my logo right over there. That's it for this episode of Tim's School of Pipes, boys and girls. Class dismissed.